First of all, we've been talking about COVID marshals. I spoke to the journalist Christopher Snowdon earlier. He's quite relaxed about the fact that authorities around the country are hiring more COVID marshals. He thinks it will be short-lived, but I'm worried we're setting a precedent of having our lives micromanaged by people in a high visibility coat.
Oh, I completely agree. I think it does set a worrying precedent in terms of, I mean, it's sort of like a snitch culture, isn't it? Where you've got other members of the public watchfully awaiting any misstep from other members of the public. And it creates quite an A, distrustful and B, a sort of oppressive environment, I think. However, I'm actually not surprised because I think the government probably anticipated that so many people would take advantage of being let out of their cages and then given a few crumbs. And they've been, working hard to preach caution, about people being let out. So I'm actually not surprised that they're doing this, but I do agree with you. I do think it does set a worrying precedent. And I'm very skeptical about whether these kinds of means will be stopped completely in the future.
I also wonder whether if a law needs that much enforcement, the law's an ass.
I mean, exactly, because at the end of the day, people are going to behave like normal human beings. They're going to want to go out. They're going to want to take advantage of a bit of sun. I remember when people were allowed outside for the first time a few weeks ago, and there were cameras taking pictures of all the young people having fun on the grass. Well, the sun's out, and also we've been in lockdown for months on end. What do you really expect? And this is the thing about these lockdown laws. They seriously infringe upon normal human behaviour, and we naturally gravitate towards socialising. And that's why things like lockdown are extremely unsustainable.
I'm hoping for a peaceful transfer of power, Dominique, from the state back to the people. And the arrival of more COVID marshals suggests the opposite is happening.
Exactly. I mean, it's not even just the point of the COVID marshals. The COVID marshals is one element of all of this, but there's also the prospect of vaccine passports that are hanging over our heads, essentially. So, I mean, what will we have? Will we have COVID marshals throughout the rest of the year to make sure that people are maintaining social distancing? And then on top of that, COVID passports that segregate different members of society. These are very worrying prospects. And if we don't actually start voicing our concern for them now, how do we know there will be an end to them by the end of this year or even next year, maybe?
Well, indeed. And at the height of the pandemic, I've never been asking for, just get rid of all the rules and have street parties straight away. But with case numbers in further decline, even the principle of social distancing and face coverings needs to be looked at, doesn't it? Because in my view, long term, over the next few years, if you continue to have social distancing and all of these so-called low-level measures, you don't have an economy that's fit for purpose. Because, certainly hospitality can't function long term with social distancing. It's not an option.
Oh, no, it really isn't. Even with the outdoor opening of hospitality, I think only a third of pubs were actually able to open because a lot of places just simply weren't able to open because of the fact that they A, didn't have outdoor seating, or B, that it just didn't make sense money-wise for them to open up when they just wouldn't have enough revenue coming in. And that is a really scary prospect. The government needs to get its act together. Realistically, businesses will not be able to survive with these kinds of rules in place. And I think it's dangerous that the government isn't actually given a specific timescale of when social distancing and mask wearing will need to be defunct. And I'm seeing a lot of scientific commentators saying that, they'll be here for the foreseeable future, rules or no rules, which is terrifying.
Well, indeed, I reported on this show a week ago that a paper by Imperial College London to Sage has suggested that we need to normalise things like face coverings and social distancing forever. And that's something that we cannot allow to be normal.
No, because it's not normal. I mean, I was on the train back from Glasgow today, and there was this guy who was also on the train complaining about having to wear masks and complaining about the level of control that people are under. And I think this is just one person, but I think it's a representation of a growing mood throughout the country that people are getting sick of this. Masks are the most annoying things to wear. You can't breathe in them. Even as a woman, this sounds ridiculous, but they smudge all your makeup all around your face. You can't hear people properly. They're not a realistic thing to use. So why are people pushing these measures? I honestly don't understand.
They are scientifically debatable and catastrophic to the environment. I had good, Keep Britain Tidy on the show a few weeks ago, and they said we're throwing away 53 million of these every single day. They're not recyclable. There's some evidence that they contain microplastics and other chemicals that could be harmful to human health. So that is a debate we will continue to have. It was obviously Freedom Day on Monday, Dominique. We missed you at the Horseshoe Pub. I'm sure you'd love to have been there. How have you celebrated your newfound freedom this week?
Well, the other day I went out to a bar, had some food, had some drinks, had such a lovely time. The atmosphere outside was just amazing. And although, you know, it is crumbs and people are still restricted, it was just so refreshing to see people outside, people having fun, to see people dressed up, and to hear music and a bit of liveliness again. I mean, there were some drunk people in the streets singing away, clearly as happy as Larry. And I don't know, I felt very nostalgic. I felt like this is what I'm used to. This is the Britain that I love. This is the civilization that I love. I mean, let's bring it back and stop this nonsense.
Couldn't agree with you more. Luther is one of the most successful programmes the BBC has ever made. My team were telling me earlier that it's fantastic. I need to give it a watch. But unfortunately, according to a BBC diversity boss, it doesn't feel authentic because the main character has no black friends and doesn't eat Caribbean food. What do you think about this?
Oh, I mean, at this point, I'm starting to think that these people are just bored and trying to see what they can get away with. This diversity lobby that we see within the BBC and other major corporations, they're so desperate to actually have things to say that they end up coming out with ridiculous and actually pretty racist things like that. I mean, the supposition that in order for a black person to be authentic, they need to then exhibit stereotypical traits of different races, that supposition in itself is racist. The thing about Luther is that he isn't defined by his race. The show isn't about him being black. He's a detective and it's a gritty crime drama. And those are the kinds of representations of black people that we need to see more and more. We need to see them in different environments that aren't defined by their race. And surely the diversity lobby and those on the woke far left would actually want to see these kinds of representations that aren't constantly in the context of either stereotypes, pain, or hardship. But no, they clearly don't. And that's because their agenda isn't really about equality. It's about special treatment and seeing what they can get away with. And that's why this story in itself is just so representative of the contradictions that constantly exist within their ridiculous arguments.
Now, I'm a very big fan of Jeremy Vine, a fantastic broadcaster, a really nice man. But he has made waves today. He's been blasted online for turning Prince Philip's funeral into a race issue by pointing out that all the guests are white. He asked one of his guests on his morning show whether this was a problem that Prince Philip's funeral was too white. I really think we've jumped the shark at this point, haven't we?
Look, I also like Jeremy Vine. He's very friendly and nice towards me, and I've been on his show a few times. But I mean, come on. And the feeling that I get whenever these kinds of ridiculous things are proposed is I feel as though I want to ask, I mean, do you think I care about this? Is that why you're asking me this question? Do you think I will be grateful to you for bringing up racism in any kind of scenario that you can find? Because I'm not grateful for it. Actually, it's really exhausting to kind of assume that I will find racism in every single situation. Even Prince Philip's funeral, you know, God rest his soul. I don't care. His family's white. You know, the majority of the royal family's white. That's great. Obviously, his funeral is going to be mostly white people. Does he want the royal family to pick out token black people to fill up the funeral? Because even then, that would be criticised in itself. So you really just can't even win anyway.
Is it another example of a privileged middle-class white person virtue signalling by making a point like this, by suggesting that an elderly white man's funeral is not diverse enough? I wonder whether this whole problem is white people peddling this nonsense.
I mean, not to be divisive, but a lot of the time it is, you know, it is liberal, middle class white people that do peddle this kind of stuff. And it's difficult for me because I doubt black people even really care that much, or ethnic minorities in general, about whether or not there are any black or Asian or ethnic minority people at Prince Philip's funeral. It's just you and is it paranoia? Is it self-consciousness? Is it guilt? I don't know, but can we please stop?
Well, can we please stop? I interviewed the fantastic legendary footballer Luther Blissett on this programme a few months ago, and we were discussing the BAME issue, which is now a word that we don't use. And actually at the time he said, please don't say BAME. I hate that word. I'm just a British man.
Mm-hmm. Completely agree. The term BAME, the thing I don't like about the term BAME is that it lumps all ethnic minorities together, and it basically assumes that we share the same experiences, share the same history, and share the same culture. And a lot of the time, the term BAME is used as a buzzword to refer to many different scenarios that represent a range of different things. So, for example, a lot of the disparities between ethnic minorities in the UK are extremely different. For example, the Indian demographic earns higher on average than the white demographic. And there are a lot of nuance in between. So that's why terms like BAME are really unhelpful. And I'm glad that the Commission in particular recommended that we stop using that term.
Indeed. You do wonder whether Irish people aren't going to be authentically Irish unless they're drinking Guinness.
Oh, it's just completely ridiculous. And the thing is, even about Idris Elba particularly, he's not even West Indian, he's African. So that in itself, the whole rice and peas Caribbean food trope, is not even accurate. So that just proves again that you don't know what you're talking about. So please just stop talking.